The fluorescent lights of the hospital room flickered, casting long shadows that seemed to dance on the walls. I was propped up in my bed, a myriad of tubes and monitors attached to me, when Ethan walked in. His gait was confident, almost too confident for someone who was supposed to be recovering from major surgery. My surgery. The surgery where I had given him a part of me, quite literally, to save his life. "Laura, we need to talk," Ethan began, avoiding my gaze. His voice was steady, but there was an undercurrent of unease. I nodded, bracing myself for what was to come, but nothing could have prepared me for his next words. "I think we should get a divorce." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I felt as if the ground had been yanked from under me. "What?" I managed to choke out, my voice barely above a whisper. Ethan finally met my gaze, his eyes cold and detached. "Look, Laura, you can't take care of the house or me anymore. This situation has made it clear. You're not the partner I need." I was stunned into silence. The man who stood before me, the man I had loved and cared for, seemed like a stranger. "But I just gave you part of my liver. I saved your life." My voice cracked with emotion, a mixture of disbelief and anger bubbling to the surface. "That's just it, Laura. You did save my life, and I'll be forever grateful. But gratitude isn't enough to sustain a marriage. We've been drifting apart for years, and this is just the final straw." His words cut deeper than any scalpel ever could. I had laid on that operating table for him, endured pain and risked my life, and this was how he repaid me? With coldness and divorce papers? "You knew what you were signing up for when we got married," I retorted, my anger rising. "You promised to be there in sickness and in health. Or does that only apply when it's convenient for you?" Ethan sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "I know what I said, Laura, but people change, situations change. I need to think about my future, and I can't see you in it anymore." I wanted to scream, to lash out, to tell him how unfair this was, but the words died in my throat. Instead, I whispered, "So this is it? You're abandoning me when I need you the most?" "It's not like that, Laura. I can't be the person you want me to be. I'm sorry." Without another word, Ethan turned and left the room, leaving me alone with my thoughts and a heart shattered into a million pieces. As the door clicked shut, a bitter laugh escaped my lips. The irony of it all wasn't lost on me. Ethan, the man who couldn't bear the thought of caring for his sick wife, was alive because of me. And now he was walking away, free to live his life, while I lay here, broken and betrayed. In that moment, a fire ignited within me, burning away the remnants of my affection for Ethan. He wanted a divorce? Fine. But I wouldn't make it easy for him. I would fight back, and I would make sure he regretted this day for the rest of his life. The days turned into weeks, and the hospital room felt more like a prison than a place of healing. Each day blended into the next, marked only by the visits from doctors and the occasional obligatory check-in from Ethan's family, who seemed more concerned with his well-being than mine. It was during one of these long, lonely afternoons that I found myself reflecting on the past, on how Ethan and I had arrived at this painful juncture. Our story began at the small publishing firm where we both worked. Ethan, with his keen insight into political affairs, and I, a hopeful comic artist, found ourselves drawn together by our shared ambition and love for the written word. Our relationship blossomed quickly, fueled by late-night discussions about our dreams and aspirations. Ethan was charming, passionate about his work, and seemingly devoted to me. When he proposed, it felt like a dream come true. However, the dream began to crumble soon after our wedding. Ethan's career took off, and he became consumed by his work, leaving me to manage the household alone. Our conversations, once filled with mutual respect and understanding, turned into heated debates about my role in our marriage. "You knew what you were getting into when you married me, Laura," Ethan would say whenever I voiced my loneliness or dissatisfaction. "I need a partner who supports my career, not someone who needs constant attention." I remember trying to express how isolated I felt, only to be met with dismissal. "Laura, you're overreacting. We're doing fine. You just need to find something to keep you busy," he'd respond, his eyes glued to his phone or laptop, never really seeing me. The realization that Ethan saw me more as a convenience than a partner was a bitter pill to swallow. I threw myself into my comics, pouring my heart and soul into the panels. trying to fill the growing void between us. My characters lived vibrant, fulfilling lives, stark contrasts to my own, which seemed to be shrinking with each passing day. It was during a family gathering that Ethan's mother, perhaps sensing my growing despair, pulled me aside. "Laura, I'm sorry. Ethan has always been driven, but you don't deserve to be pushed aside. You're family now, and we're here for you, even if he's not." Those words, meant to comfort, only deepened my sense of failure. How had my life become a series of apologies and excuses for the man I loved? Our marriage, once the source of my happiness, had become a facade. I was living with a man who valued his career and social standing more than our relationship, a man who believed my sacrifice and support were simply parts of the role I had agreed to play. The love and partnership I had once believed in had dissolved into a business arrangement, one that Ethan was now seeking to terminate because I had become an inconvenient liability. As I lay in the hospital bed staring at the sterile white walls, I realized that Ethan's request for a divorce wasn't just the end of our marriage, it was my chance to reclaim my life. No longer would I be the silent supporter, the convenient wife. I would fight back, not just for the sake of revenge, but to regain my dignity and self-worth. Ethan thought he could discard me after everything I had done for him, after I had literally given a piece of myself to save his life. But I would show him that I was more than just a caretaker, more than just his wife. I was Laura Barnes, and I would not be underestimated. The resolve that had sparked in me the day Ethan walked out of my hospital room had now turned into a roaring blaze. I was ready to face whatever came next, armed with the truth and a newfound strength that Ethan had never seen. The day Ethan was diagnosed with cirrhosis was the day our fragile semblance of a marriage was put to the ultimate test. I remember the cold, clinical tone of the doctor as he explained the severity of Ethan's condition. "Without a liver transplant, Mr. Barnes's prognosis is very poor," he had said, his gaze shifting between Ethan and me. Ethan's reaction was one of sheer denial. There must be some mistake. "I feel fine," he protested, but the evidence was irrefutable. The lifestyle he had led, the endless work events accompanied by heavy drinking, had taken their toll. It was then, in the stark, impersonal hospital room, that Ethan turned to me with a desperation I had never seen in him before. "Laura, you're my only hope. Please, I need you." The weight of his plea hung heavily between us. Despite everything, the part of me that had loved him, that still cared for him on some level, couldn't turn away. "If I'm a match, I'll do it," I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. The tests confirmed that I was indeed a suitable donor, and the surgery was scheduled. The days leading up to it were a blur of paperwork, medical consultations, and a profound sense of loneliness. Ethan's family thanked me, their gratitude genuine, yet tinged with the unspoken acknowledgement of Ethan's role in his own predicament. "Thank you, Laura. You're doing a brave thing," Ethan's mother had said, her eyes wet with unshed tears. But Ethan's response was markedly different, almost indifferent, as if he considered my sacrifice a mere transaction. "You're saving my career, Laura. I won't forget this," he had said, but the warmth I had once felt for him was gone, replaced by a hollow emptiness. The surgery itself was a success, at least for Ethan. He recovered quickly, buoyed by the prospect of returning to his life, his career. I, on the other hand, faced complications. The physical pain was nothing compared to the realization that Ethan viewed my suffering as a necessary inconvenience, a stepping stone on his path to recovery. During one of his rare visits to my hospital room, Ethan's true feelings became painfully clear. "You know, this really puts things into perspective. I need to focus on my recovery, on getting back to work. We'll talk about us later," he had said, avoiding my gaze. "Us? What's there to talk about?" "You've made your priorities clear, Ethan," I retorted, the bitterness in my voice surprising even me. Ethan had merely shrugged, the gesture dismissive. "Laura, you knew what you were getting into when you married me. My career has always been my priority. You agreed to support me, remember?" That conversation was a turning point for me. It crystallized the stark reality of our marriage. To Ethan, I was nothing more than a means to an end, a convenient solution to his problems. My well-being, my dreams, my sacrifices were irrelevant to him. As Ethan left the room, his footsteps echoing hollowly in the sterile corridor, a resolve hardened within me. I would no longer be the silent, suffering wife. Ethan had taken everything from me, my love, my liver, and now he sought to discard me when I was no longer of use to him. But I would not let him. I would fight back, not just for myself, but for every moment of neglect, every dismissive word, every sacrifice made in vain. Ethan Barnes would learn that my generosity came with a price, one that he would pay dearly. In the sterile ambience of Ethan's lawyer's office, I found myself sitting across from the man I once vowed to spend my life with. Ethan's demeanor was a mixture of impatience and arrogance, a stark contrast to the gravity of our meeting. Without any preamble, he pushed a set of documents toward me. "Let's get this over with," Ethan said, barely hiding his disdain. "I've offered you a fair settlement. Everything is in order." I scanned the documents, my heart sinking with each word. "Fair?" I echoed, disbelief coloring my tone. "You think abandoning your wife after she saved your life is fair?" Ethan smirked, a cold glint in his eyes. "I'm just being realistic, Laura. Our marriage was over long before this. It's better for both of us to move on." The lawyer shifted uncomfortably, sensing the tension, but Ethan waved him off, his focus solely on me. "Look, Laura, I'm starting a new chapter in my life. I suggest you do the same. Take the settlement. It's more than generous given the circumstances." His words stung, a brutal reminder of the transactional nature of what our marriage had devolved into. "A new chapter? At my expense?" I retorted, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "You owe me for every sacrifice, every ignored plea for attention, every moment of pain." Ethan laughed, a sound that sent shivers down my spine. "You're delusional if you think you're entitled to anything more. I made you who you are. Without me, you're nothing." That was the last straw. The pain and humiliation I had endured crystallized into a fierce resolve. "We'll see about that, Ethan. You may think you've won, but this is far from over. I'll make sure of it." As I left the office, Ethan's facade of confidence seemed to crack, revealing a flicker of doubt. The battle lines were drawn, and I was no longer the woman he thought he could easily discard. The days that followed were a blur of strategizing and planning. Mark, a colleague and friend, became my ally in the quest for justice. Over coffee one afternoon, I shared the full extent of Ethan's betrayal, my words painting a vivid picture of the man behind the public persona. "He can't get away with this, Laura," Mark said, his anger mirroring my own. "You deserve better. We need to expose him for who he truly is." "I agree," I replied, the weight of my decision heavy on my shoulders. "It's time for some well-deserved karma." Together, we crafted a plan that was both bold and risky. Utilizing Mark's connections, we secured an interview with a prominent online platform known for its investigative journalism. The piece would detail my side of the story, laying bare Ethan's deceit and manipulation for the world to see. On the day the article was published, I felt a mix of fear and vindication. The headline alone, "The Unseen Sacrifice, a Wife's Tale of Betrayal and Bravery," was a testament to the journey I had embarked upon. Ethan's reaction was swift and predictable. His fury came through the phone line, palpable and venomous. "How dare you do this to me, Laura? You'll pay for this." "It's only the truth, Ethan," I responded, my voice calm but firm. "Something you've been running from for far too long." "You think you can destroy me?" "I'll sue you for defamation," he threatened, his voice a blend of anger and desperation. "Go ahead and try," I countered, a sense of empowerment coursing through me. "Everything in that article is the truth, and I have the evidence to prove it. It's your word against mine, and the court of public opinion has already made its verdict." The call ended with Ethan slamming the phone down, but I remained unfazed. I had taken the first step in reclaiming my life and dignity, no longer a silent victim of Ethan's cruelty. As the fallout from the article began to unfold, with Ethan's public image and career taking a hit, I watched from a distance. There was no joy in my heart, only a solemn satisfaction that justice was finally being served. I had started this fight to expose the truth, not for revenge, but to reclaim my voice that Ethan had tried so hard to silence. Now, standing on the precipice of a new beginning, I knew the hardest battles were still ahead. But for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to face them head-on. The aftermath of the article's publication was like watching a slow-motion collapse of Ethan's carefully constructed world. My phone buzzed continuously with notifications, texts from old friends, colleagues, and even strangers expressing their support and sharing their own stories of disillusionment and betrayal. It was overwhelming, yet validating. Ethan, on the other hand, found himself in the eye of a storm he could no longer control. The first crack in Ethan's armor appeared publicly when a video of him confronting a journalist went viral. His anger, usually so well masked by charm and wit, was on full display for the world to see. "Why don't you tell the real story about how Laura is trying to ruin my life?" Ethan spat at the journalist, who merely replied, "We're just interested in the truth, Mr. Barnes." The truth. A concept so foreign to Ethan, it seemed to enrage him further. His tirade continued, unaware of the cameras recording every word, every gesture of disdain. This was not the Ethan the public knew and admired. This was the man I had lived with, fought with, and ultimately left. As Ethan's public persona unraveled, I received a call from Mark, his voice tinged with excitement and anticipation. "Have you seen the latest? Ethan's self-destructing. Your story has opened the floodgates. People are coming forward with their own experiences." I hadn't anticipated the breadth of the impact. I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's more than I expected. I just wanted to share my story, not this." Mark was quick to reassure me. "Laura, you did the right thing. Ethan's true colors needed to be exposed. The world needed to see him for who he really is." As Ethan's life spiraled, his attempts to regain control became more desperate and pathetic. Sponsors withdrew their support. His social media became a battleground, and his professional engagements dried up. The man who once held the power to sway public opinion was now a pariah, his words dissected and discredited. The culmination of Ethan's downfall came one evening when I saw him pleading his case on a low-rated talk show, a far cry from the influential platforms he once frequented. "I've been misrepresented," Ethan claimed, his voice lacking its usual conviction. "This is a coordinated attack on my character." But the host was unsympathetic. "The evidence suggests otherwise, Mr. Barnes. Your actions, your words, have led us here. It seems you are your own worst enemy." Watching Ethan flounder, I felt a complex mix of emotions. There was no satisfaction in seeing him destroyed, no joy in his suffering. What I felt was a somber recognition of the inevitable conclusion to a story that had started the moment Ethan chose his ambition over our marriage, his ego over our partnership. The chapter closes not with a celebration of victory, but with a quiet contemplation of the cost of truth. Ethan's downfall was a public spectacle, but for me, it was a deeply personal closure to a chapter of my life that had brought me to the brink. I turned off the TV and looked around my quiet apartment, the noise of Ethan's downfall fading into the background. It was time to move forward, to rebuild not just my life, but my sense of self. Ethan's legacy would be one of caution and regret, but mine was still unwritten. And with each passing day, I was finding the strength to write a new chapter, one defined by resilience, dignity, and an unyielding pursuit of truth. Ethan's downfall from grace wasn't just a spectacle. It became a cautionary tale whispered within the corridors of power and across social media platforms. His attempts to salvage his reputation only dug his grave deeper, each denial and accusation against me serving to alienate him further from the court of public opinion. A few weeks after the tumultuous interview, Ethan reached out to me directly for the first time since the article's publication. His voice, once confident and commanding, now carried a note of desperation. "Laura, please," Ethan pleaded over the phone. "We need to talk. This has gone too far. Can't we just meet and sort this out?" His words, meant to sway, only served to remind me of the countless times his promises had fallen flat. "Sort this out?" I echoed, my tone incredulous. "Ethan, there's nothing left to sort. You made your choices." "But I'm losing everything," Ethan stammered, the facade of the unflappable commentator crumbling. "Can't you see? This vendetta of yours is destroying me." I paused, weighing my response. "This isn't a vendetta, Ethan. It's accountability, something you've avoided for far too long." Ethan's reply was a mix of anger and pleading. "I'll make it right, Laura. Just help me stop this madness." "Stop it," I replied, a resolve strengthening within me. "Ethan, the only madness was thinking you could treat people the way you did without consequence. You're on your own." The call ended with a click, and I was left with the silence of my apartment, a stark contrast to the turmoil Ethan was facing. His empire, built on charisma and manipulation, was now just ruins, his legacy tarnished by his own actions. The weeks that followed saw Ethan's public appearances dwindle to nothing. The few platforms that once vied for his insights now shunned him, his name becoming synonymous with betrayal and deceit. Even his social media, once a battleground of support and condemnation, went silent, as if the world had moved on, leaving Ethan Barnes a mere footnote in a relentless news cycle. But the true extent of Ethan's downfall was brought home to me one evening when Mark called, his voice somber. "Have you heard? Ethan's been let go from his consultancy. Apparently, the firm wants to distance themselves from any controversy." I hadn't heard, and the news left me with a complex knot of emotions. Ethan had built his career on being the voice of reason, the insightful commentator who could unravel complex political landscapes with ease. Now he was voiceless, his fall from grace complete. "It's a shame," I found myself saying, not just for Ethan, but for all that had been lost along the way. "He had potential, Mark. He just lost sight of what was important." Mark agreed, the conversation drifting to other topics, but my thoughts remained on Ethan. In his relentless pursuit of success, he had sacrificed everything, including those who cared for him. His downfall was not just a failure of character, but a warning of the price of ambition unchecked by empathy or responsibility. As I hung up the phone, the finality of Ethan's situation settled over me. There was no joy in his loss, no sense of victory in his defeat. Instead, there was a quiet acknowledgement of the inevitable outcome of a life lived at the expense of others. Turning away from the window, I realized that while Ethan's story might have ended, mine was just beginning. Freed from the shadow of his deceit, I could finally start anew, building a future on my terms, defined not by the pain of the past, but by the promise of tomorrow.
You're useless. You can't even handle the chores or take care of the kids, let alone pay the alimony. Kyle had finally shown up at the hospital 3 weeks after my traffic accident, spouting these harsh words without showing any concern for me as I lay there in the hospital bed. At first, I had hoped Kyle came to visit me out of concern, but he proved to be a letdown. I sighed deeply. To be honest, I had already been thinking about getting a divorce. I didn't expect Kyle to bring it up now, but I guess I should be thankful. It saved us both some trouble. Fine, I agreed quickly, which surprised Kyle. Little did he know, I was already one step ahead. I wanted to tell him that I knew what he was planning and was silently laughing at him in my head. My name is Sarah. I'm a 40-year-old housewife living with my husband Kyle and our 7-year-old daughter Lisa. Kyle and I met during a group blind date and got married when I was 30. He was easy to talk to, and eventually I fell for him, and we started dating. Kyle was charming and the most handsome man at the table when we first met. When he expressed his interest in me, I felt flattered and proud. Kyle was incredibly romantic in our early days. He would surprise me with dessert plates and bouquets at fancy restaurants for my birthdays, take me on trips for our anniversaries, and write heartfelt letters at just the right moments. I felt so lucky to have him and eagerly accepted his marriage proposal, imagining a life full of surprises and excitement even after marriage. But once we were married, things took a turn. "Hey Sarah, my dinner isn't ready yet." "I've been working all day, and you can't even have dinner prepared when I get back." "You're so lazy." Once married life began, he started demanding, like he was the master of the house and I was supposed to be his caretaker. At first, I was shocked by the change in him. I thought he was just joking. When we were dating, we used to laugh at each other's silly jokes. We imagined a sweet newlywed life where we called each other by cute nicknames and stayed lovey-dovey even after having kids. But it turned out he wasn't joking at all. He treated me like a servant or something even worse. At first, I would laugh it off, thinking he was joking, but gradually I realized he was serious. He really saw me as his caretaker, and that was frightening. After we got married, I had to quit my job, and we depended on the money Kyle earned. I was scared that if I didn't do as he said, he might cut me off financially, so I felt trapped. Honestly, Kyle's income wasn't great. I was making more when I was working. Kyle only finished high school and jumped from one job to another. His unstable work history continued, quitting jobs every year or two. It seemed Kyle felt insecure about his background and took out his frustrations on me. "I'm sorry I got delayed with some errands," I told him once. "Don't make excuses, just hurry up and make it," Kyle replied, sitting down with a cold beer. This had become a common scene, but each time I sighed and started cooking. My marriage made me miserable, but I managed to get by. The following year, our daughter Lisa was born, and my days became a series of struggles. As expected, Kyle didn't help much with Lisa. However, he would spoil her by buying her candy or toys she wanted. I tried to raise Lisa properly, so I scolded her when needed, which made her cling to Kyle even more. "Lisa, you like Daddy, don't you?" Kyle asked her once. "Yeah, Daddy is cool." "I love Daddy," Lisa replied. "I knew it, I'm super dad," Kyle said, looking at me smugly. It was frustrating, but I couldn't help feeling glad that Lisa loved her father. I just sighed again. Despite his spoiling her, Kyle never attended any of Lisa's kindergarten events like sports festivals or recitals. You know, there's a parent-child race at Lisa's sports festival. "Could you participate?" I asked him. "Huh? Why me?" "You're free that day. You do it," he responded. "I'm busy with work every day, but the sports festival could be a great time for us to bond as parents. It's on a holiday, so you won't have to work," I said to Kyle. "Shut up. We're already close enough. Maybe you should work on your relationship with Lisa. She thinks you're mean, you know." "You might want to fix that," Kyle said, laughing as he left for work. Calling himself a super dad, yet he never showed up to school events. I was worried that Kyle's habit of being easy on himself, but hard on others, might influence Lisa. He continued to leave all the housework and childcare to me and was lazy at home. Now Lisa is 5 years old and ready to start elementary school, but Kyle was still jumping from job to job. He had just quit his factory job last month and moved to a food and beverage company. "I'll be working weekends at my new job since it's in the food industry," he said. "Looks like we'll hardly see each other then," I replied. "Can't be helped. It's work," Kyle said. Honestly, I was relieved because I was tired of Kyle ordering me around on weekends. Now I wouldn't have to be nagged by him to clean the floor or serve meals quickly. But if Kyle was out on weekends, Lisa would be sad. "It's better for kids to spend holidays with a whole family," I said. "I have work, so please let Lisa know," Kyle replied. I couldn't really argue with Kyle, since he was the one bringing in the money. Reluctantly, I went to tell Lisa. "I'm sorry, but Daddy won't be able to go out with you on his day off," I said. I thought Lisa would be upset, so I told her with a frown. However, contrary to my expectations, Lisa seemed unconcerned. "It's okay. If you're okay with it, then it's fine. You know he's not going to be here on all weekends, right? Daddy has been smelling strange lately," she said. "A strange smell?" I asked, puzzled. Lisa nodded and went back to her room. What on earth was she talking about? I've been so busy with housework and taking care of our child that I hadn't noticed much about Kyle lately. Our marriage was not like it used to be, and I tried to avoid being around Kyle to keep things calm. The strange smell Lisa mentioned might be from the factory, I thought. Factories often use special solvents, so it made sense that Kyle could come home with a weird smell. If that was the case, the smell would probably go away soon. Kids are really honest, which is what makes them so endearing. Despite what he said, Kyle started leaving the house early in the morning, even on his days off, which was odd. He also left every weekday. If he was working weekends, he should have a day off during the week. He left without saying anything to me, so I couldn't tell if he was going to work or not. I became curious about what he was doing, leaving so early even on his days off. One day, I asked Kyle, "You seem to be going out every day off. What are you doing?" Kyle looked confused for a moment, then answered in an annoyed tone while scratching his head, "I'm working. I go to work voluntarily." "Really? But you should take care of yourself, or your body won't hold up," I replied. "Shut up. Don't complain about my job," Kyle snapped back. I didn't understand why he got so angry when he often complained about my housework and child rearing. I didn't believe what Kyle said. There's no way he, who usually avoids trouble, would go to work voluntarily on his days off. I knew this from watching him closely over the years. If he was that passionate about work, he would have stayed at his previous job longer. I also started paying attention to the strange smell that Lisa mentioned. Indeed, Kyle came home with a sweet, strong fragrance. This strange smell was not from the factory. Why hadn't I noticed this before? I blamed myself for being so naive and vowed not to make the same mistake again. From then on, I decided to watch Kyle more carefully, especially on weekdays when he said he was going to work. He seemed to wake up an hour earlier than usual and took extra care grooming himself. He appeared to be in a good mood on those days, which varied from week to week, sometimes being on a Monday, sometimes on a Thursday. But it was clear that Kyle was happy on those days. When he left the house, I went into his room to look for any clues. I felt like a detective searching a house. Since I always cleaned Kyle's room, I knew it well and didn't feel bad about snooping around. If Kyle had hidden anything, it would be in a place not easily seen. I searched carefully under the desk and bed. Finally, hidden in a candy tin in the closet, I found a bunch of letters. What were these? All the letters were from the same person named Patricia. They had been sent through the mail. The oldest letter was from 4 months ago, and the newest was from yesterday. As I read the letters, I saw phrases like, "I regretted when we broke up, but now I really love you, and I want to go back to the time when I was with you." It sounded like something a lovesick teenager would say. At first, I thought maybe Kyle's ex-girlfriend was sending these letters on her own, but then I read a line that worried me. "I'm glad you like me again. I'm looking forward to our next date." This was from last week. It looked like Kyle was seeing Patricia. Today, he was definitely up to something. I took photos of the letters with my smartphone as evidence. I thought about taking the letters, but I didn't want to make Kyle suspicious. Even with these letters, I felt I didn't have enough proof. After thinking it over, I decided to hire a private investigator to check on Kyle. 3 weeks later, the investigator gave me the results quickly. He brought photos of Kyle and Patricia close together in the park at night, and even a recording of them saying, "I love you" to each other. I accepted the facts calmly. With solid proof in hand, I went to the municipal office and came back with a divorce form. Now that I knew Kyle was cheating, I had no reason to stay with him. I planned to confront him with the divorce papers the next time something happened. I returned home and let out a deep sigh. I was acting resolved, but honestly, I was heartbroken. I was upset with myself for having married someone as careless as Kyle. I was thinking about resting a bit before making dinner when my phone rang. "Hello." "Yes, Sarah. Do you have time to talk?" "Yes, what's going on?" I was surprised to get a call from my father. He usually doesn't call me. "Actually, your mother and I were talking yesterday, and we're thinking about transferring our assets to you soon." Huh? What happened? My father ran a company that sold imported goods to Japanese corporations. I was the daughter of a big company president, but I never told Kyle about this. I thought it would make me sound boastful, especially since Kyle jumped from one job to another. We're getting old and thinking about retiring. We thought about keeping the company going, but didn't want to push it onto you, our only daughter, so we've decided to step back. I see. I felt guilty about not taking over the company, but my parents respected my decision and had planned for the future. I was touched by their thoughtfulness. We're thinking of handing over our assets to you. Our total wealth is $17 million, but we're fine with just $3 million. We've decided to give you the remaining $15 million. What, $15 million? I was shocked. That was more money than I could ever imagine earning in my lifetime. Yes, there will probably be inheritance tax, but you'll still have plenty left. You won't have to worry about living expenses for the rest of your life, Dad said. Thank you. I expressed my deepest gratitude to my father and mother and hung up. Soon $17 million would be coming my way. With that money, I wouldn't have any worries, even if I divorced Kyle. No offense to him, but he probably couldn't earn that much. I felt relieved and was in a daze for a while. I glanced at the clock. It was 6:00 p.m. I realized I needed to make dinner and checked the fridge, but there were no groceries left. I got ready to go shopping at the supermarket. My heart was light, but I also felt a sense of urgency that Kyle might come home soon. As I was hurrying across the last crosswalk to the supermarket, the light turned green. Watch out! Someone yelled, but it was too late. My body was already in the air, and then I hit the ground hard. A sharp pain shot through my head, and without understanding what had happened, I lost consciousness. When I woke up, I was lying on a hospital bed. The first thing I saw when I opened my eyes were my parents and Lisa. Sarah, thank goodness, Mom said. Lisa was crying next to me. I gently stroked her head. You were hit by a car and broke both legs. They say it will take 5 months to fully recover. 5 months. I felt dizzy thinking about being out of action for so long. From that day on, I was stuck in a wheelchair. Although the nurses took care of me, I felt frustrated and annoyed because I couldn't use my legs. During my stay in the hospital, my parents and friends visited me. My parents were taking care of Lisa now, since Kyle was always at work. I thought that was better for her. I was glad everyone visited, but Kyle never came. I started to doubt his care, thinking, aren't we husband and wife? However, 1 week after I was hospitalized, Kyle finally showed up. Hey, feeling good? Kyle asked sarcastically. Yes. Man, it's a mess at home without me, I replied lightly. Kyle always complained about my housework as soon as he spoke, showing no empathy. I sighed, thinking he would be at least a little worried about me. What can I do? I was in a car accident, I snapped back. Kyle looked at me with disdain and said, you're useless if you can't do housework or take care of the child. That's the worst, and you should pay alimony. He said such horrible things to his hospitalized wife. Initially, I had hoped Kyle came to visit out of concern, but he was still disappointed. I sighed deeply. Honestly, I had been thinking about getting a divorce myself. I hadn't expected Kyle to bring up divorce today, but it saved me the trouble of arguing. Sure, I said, and Kyle looked surprised when I agreed. Unfortunately, I know what you're up to, I wanted to say, laughing inside. Here's a divorce notice. I took out a filled-in divorce form from a bag that my mother had bought and held it in front of Kyle's face. You already had this. Kyle was briefly confused, his eyes wide, but then he took the divorce notice from me and filled in his name and address right there. I felt relieved knowing I wouldn't have to see Kyle's face ever again. I wanted to tell him the feeling was mutual, but I just watched him leave silently. Probably Kyle will remarry Patricia after the divorce. I don't know what kind of woman Patricia is, but it's sad to think she's going to marry someone as controlling and unpleasant as Kyle. I feel a bit guilty about Lisa, but deciding to leave was something I had thought about a long time ago. I promised myself I would take good care of Lisa. A month after Kyle left, my life was peaceful. The time without my husband nagging me felt like heaven. I was released from the hospital and started physical therapy. I decided to stay at my parents' house until my leg healed. My parents were angry at Kyle when they learned about the divorce, but they stopped pressing the issue when I told them I wanted to forget about him. Lisa doesn't seem lonely even without her father around, and is going to elementary school happily. In the end, Lisa also noticed Kyle's domineering behavior and probably doesn't see him as a father anymore. I was convinced that divorcing Kyle was the right decision, but one afternoon I got a call on my mobile phone. I ignored it when I saw Kyle's name, but the phone kept ringing nonstop. Eventually, I answered the call. "Hey Sarah, when are you coming back?" Kyle's words made no sense to me, and he sounded like he was about to start yelling. "What do you mean, coming back? You were married to Patricia, didn't you?" I replied. When I mentioned Patricia's name, Kyle sounded surprised and exclaimed, "How do you know that?" "Did you think I didn't know you cheated? That's why I asked for alimony and child support." "Yes, that's right, but alimony and child support. I can't pay that. Why do I have to pay alimony anyway? You never did the housework. You should be the one to pay," Kyle argued. I was shocked to hear Kyle's argument. I had asked for alimony and child support through a lawyer, but he hadn't paid yet. I knew Kyle didn't have a lot of money, but he should find a way to pay. Yet here he was, saying something ridiculous like, I should be the one to pay alimony. "I noticed your affair and gathered evidence." "Did you see it from the lawyer?" It seemed that Kyle had already seen the evidence from the detective agency. That would make things easier, but him calling me was ridiculous. I wanted a divorce even before I found out about the affair because you never helped with housework or childcare, and you complained all the time. "I'm not your housekeeper, you know. But it's good you're married now. You have someone else to look after you." But here's the thing. Patricia can't do housework. Before we got married, she said, "Leave everything to me." But once we got married, her cooking was terrible, and she didn't clean. I would have been better off with you. Marry me again. After all, you don't have any money, right? Lisa liked me too, didn't she? Kyle said, which annoyed me. "What are you talking about? You divorced me and remarried. You're her partner, not my responsibility. And sorry to say, Lisa doesn't like you, and I have money." "Don't lie to me. There's no way you have money. You are a housewife. You can't live without me." I had no intention of telling Kyle about the fortune I inherited from my parents, but faced with his aggressive attitude, I had no choice but to reveal it. My parents are CEOs. Recently, I inherited their assets. It's around $52 million in total, so I can live without working for the rest of my life. I could almost visualize Kyle gaping on the other end of the phone as he heard about this fortune. "You're lying. There's no way you have such a huge amount of money." "It's true. If you want, I can have my parents tell you." With that, Kyle finally seemed to believe my words and fell silent. Then he suddenly yelled, "If it's true, why didn't you tell me?" "Well, I wanted to tell you, but I knew about your affair, and I thought the worst of you, so I thought it didn't matter." At that point, I hadn't yet inherited the assets, and there was no issue of property distribution. Kyle bit his lip in frustration. He probably never imagined I had such assets. He must be regretting that he ever divorced me, but I didn't want to suffer his terrible behavior anymore. Can I hang up now? Please pay the alimony properly, reflect on your actions, and never call me again. Goodbye. With that, I hung up the phone. I immediately blocked Kyle's number so he couldn't call anymore. Mom, who are you talking to? Lisa walked into the room and asked curiously. Just a friend, I replied. But Lisa, do you want to go to the amusement park this weekend? Yes, Lisa smiled happily. Seeing her smile reminded me that her happiness was all that mattered to me. A few days later, I heard that Kyle had broken up with his new wife, Patricia. They argued because she wouldn't do housework, and Patricia ended up leaving him. Kyle, having been divorced twice in a short time, would probably find it hard to get married again. I hoped he would stay single for a while to prevent more people from getting hurt. After the divorce, Kyle lost his motivation and quit his job at the restaurant. He would probably find another job, but it might take him some time to get his life back on track. I felt a bit sorry for him, but his problems were his own doing. I blocked his calls so he couldn't ask me for money, and I avoided places where we used to go together. In my life, Kyle had virtually disappeared. Eventually, Kyle paid the alimony but ended up in debt. I don't know how he'll manage, but I hope he learns from his mistakes. I'm still living comfortably at my parents' house. They told us we could stay as long as we like. After my legs fully healed, I started part-time work at a local flower shop. Even though I don't need to work, I find it better to be active and leave the house. I work hard on weekdays and spend weekends having fun with Lisa and my parents. I feel more joy in life than before and want to keep living happily with the people I love. I cherish these happy moments, especially when I see Lisa's smile. How can you go on a business trip abroad if you don't have a job? Aren't you embarrassed to lie like that? It's not a lie. I really am going overseas for work, I said. Well, then we're getting divorced, he said and walked out of the room. To him, it seems like working from home means I'm just being lazy and not really working. But I have a steady income and even help pay for our living expenses. Still, he doesn't see it that way. A few days after I got back from my business trip, I found divorce papers on my desk, already signed by him. If he can't understand me after all this time, there's no point in staying married, is there? So I signed the papers and went to the court. My name is Kelly Clarkson, and I'm 31 years old. My husband, Eric, is 34. We started dating in college and got married when I was 26. We were more like best friends than romantic partners, always speaking our minds. Sometimes that's good, but it can lead to unexpected problems. For me, the problem started when I talked to him about my dream. I've always wanted to run an online store selling imported goods. I got the idea while working part-time at a boutique as a student. I love foreign designs and was drawn to the unique items I saw there. After college, I aimed to open my own store, so I became a full-time employee at the boutique. Even with a full-time job, I couldn't give up on my dream. I really want to have my own shop filled with my favorite foreign goods and deliver them to customers, I told him. My parents and friends were supportive, saying things like, "Good luck," and "You'll surely succeed." I thought Eric would understand and support my dream too. I tried to bring up the topic with Eric when he got home from work. "Hey Eric, you know I've been talking about opening my own shop for a while. What do you think about that?" "Oh no, not this again. It won't work if you do it just like that." "You should give up," he replied. "Why would you say that? It's not just a sudden idea. I've been thinking about it for a long time. Impossible is impossible. Life isn't as easy as you think, he said. There's no need to be so harsh. Why do you always shut down my ideas right away? I said, raising my voice unintentionally. Eric looked at me with cold eyes and a scornful expression. Then tell me, what's your plan if this idea of yours doesn't succeed? He asked. Well, I know it won't be successful right away, but... And what about your income until then? We're splitting the rent and living expenses now, and you're telling me I have to cover it all. He interrupted. No, that's not what I mean. I have some savings for the initial costs, and I'll still pay the rent. Oh, really? Then do whatever you want. But if it doesn't work out and you regret it, it's not my problem, he concluded. Every time I talked about starting my own business, Eric always got upset. The reason was simple. He worried my income would become unstable. The import shop where I worked was in a good location, and we had a lot of customers. Because of that, my income was pretty high, almost the same as Eric's, who worked in an office. It might even be a bit higher. That's why I often paid for meals when we went out and sometimes paid a bit more for the rent. The idea of my income going down was something Eric just couldn't accept. At first, he would say things like, "Why rush things?" Or "You should take your time and prepare," in a kind voice. But now, he didn't mind hurting my feelings. Even so, I didn't give up on my dream of having my own shop, no matter how much Eric was against it. I focused on making my dream come true. As a result, I overcame his objections, and at the age of 27, I started an online boutique. At first, just like Eric predicted, it was hard to get things going smoothly. But over the years, I tried all sorts of strategies. I used the advantages of an online shop by outsourcing to well-known e-commerce companies, promoting on social media, and doing everything I could to succeed. Thanks to these efforts, a year after starting my own business, things began to look up. I was able to make a steady income, expanded my customer base, and added more products. Now my yearly sales have reached $600,000. Because Eric was so against my business, I never talked about the sales. I figured he wouldn't care anyway, and he never asked. But he always reminded me about paying the rent and other living expenses. I always just gave him the money he asked for without making a big deal. I kept our conversations about work as simple and non-controversial as possible. But then, one day, something happened. I got a message on my online shop's direct messages. "I'm a regular customer of your shop. I was wondering, in addition to the international knickknacks, could you also sell furniture?" Actually, many customers had asked me to sell furniture too. But unlike small items, selling furniture online is more complicated. Furniture is more expensive, and things like the material are important. Even though I had worked in an import shop before, there are risks in buying and selling furniture without seeing it first. So I decided to call my old boss from the import shop to talk about it. "Hello, is this the manager? I have something I want to discuss with you." As soon as the manager Rachel recognized my voice, she sounded really happy. "Kelly, it's been a while. If there's anything I can help with, just let me know." Well, I've had some requests to sell furniture in my online shop. Furniture? That sounds like a big task. I was thinking of checking out the actual items before selling them. How did you find your products, Rachel? I see what you mean. I can definitely help with that. Rachel, who had connections with suppliers from other countries, offered to contact one of them and arrange for them to provide furniture for my shop. Because of my good relationship with Rachel, the overseas supplier was willing to help. I decided I would travel abroad to find the furniture. However, I couldn't just leave without telling my husband. So that night, I brought up the topic with Eric. Eric, about the week after next, would it be okay if I were away for about a week? A week? Why so long? He asked. Well, I might have to go abroad for work with Rachel from the shop I used to work at, I explained. Abroad? If you're going to lie, at least make it believable, he said, sounding mocking. What? I asked, confused. He pointed at me with a mocking look on his face. You're going overseas for work. You're almost unemployed. What are you even talking about? Wait a minute, you know I run an online shop, right? This trip is to find new items for the shop, I tried to explain. So you think I'll just believe you if you say it's for work? Are you stupid? Your little shop won't get you far. Think what you want, but our sales are good and our customers are growing. This trip is because a customer requested it. I insisted. If you keep pushing, I won't allow you, practically a shut-in, to leave home for a whole week, he said, then stomped off to the bathroom with a beer in hand. A deep sigh escaped from my lips. Why can't he try to understand? His reaction is too harsh just because he doesn't approve of my work. But I can't go abroad without his permission. I need to convince him, no matter what. Even though I was nervous to bring it up again, I couldn't ignore the problem. The next day, when he came home from work, I spoke to him again. Eric, about yesterday's discussion. Look, I'm tired. I don't have time for your lies. He cut me off. I'm only telling the truth. An unemployed person going on a business trip abroad. You're good at lying, he said, mocking me again. I'm not lying. I really have to go abroad for work, I said, grabbing his arm and pleading with him. He looked down at me, mocking me again. Oh, really? Then liars get divorced too. Divorced? What are you saying? I can't stand liars, especially people like you who always try to show off. I didn't mean. Shut up. You just want to use a lame excuse to go on a vacation abroad. I bet your boss is a man too, right? Divorce. I'll make sure to demand my share of everything, he said, storming out of the room. At that moment, a furious rage built up inside me. Who does he think he is, looking down on me like that? I work from home, but he only wants to feel superior. Enough is enough. If he wants it that way, then I'll do what I want. So I stopped asking for his permission and decided to go on my business trip abroad as planned. 3 weeks later, I went overseas with Rachel. We went straight to our suppliers in the U.S., where we checked out the furniture and accessories I would sell in my boutique. Since I was already abroad, I spent the last day sightseeing with Rachel, and we had a great time. However, it wasn't all easy. My phone was filled with angry messages from Eric. You didn't really go overseas, did you? Get back here now. I'll forgive you if you return today. Time's up. We're getting divorced, you worthless woman. Every message made me more annoyed, but I didn't reply. I knew that responding would only make things worse. When I get back, if he's willing to talk, we'll discuss it then. With that decision, I enjoyed a carefree week abroad. The business trip ended, and I said goodbye to Rachel at the airport. I started my journey home. Facing Eric was awkward, but I prepared myself and opened the front door. I'm home, I called out. The house was dark, and no one greeted me. As I walked into the living room, I saw laundry scattered on the floor. Used dishes and instant noodle containers were piled up in the sink. Amid this mess, I noticed a piece of paper on the desk. What is this? I thought it was a filled-out divorce paper. Beside it was a rough note that said, "To the cheating, jobless woman, I'm ending things with you. Fill out the divorce papers immediately. If you want forgiveness, come to my parents' house, then I'll reconsider." Just reading the note, I could imagine Eric's smug face. He probably thinks that by writing this, I'd rush to apologize. Of course, I had no intention of doing that. I signed the divorce papers that Eric had left for me and went straight to the state court. Everything went smoothly, and the divorce was accepted without any problems. After that, I went to a real estate agent to cancel my lease on the apartment. This apartment was where I lived when I was single. When Eric and I decided to live together, he moved in because it was spacious enough for both of us. We had talked about moving to a bigger place if we had kids, but now that wasn't going to happen. Once I finished canceling the lease, I went back to the apartment and immediately started packing my things. The next day, I arranged for my belongings to be sent to my parents' house. I also made arrangements to have Eric's things sent to his parents' house. During this time, Eric kept sending me messages full of angry demands and accusations. Stop being stubborn and come apologize now. You have until the end of the week, and messages like that. I ignored all of them. I continued to pack and send everything from the apartment, both mine and Eric's, to our respective parents' homes. After the apartment was empty, I went back to my parents' home. A week later, my phone kept ringing nonstop. Even though I ignored it, the calls wouldn't stop. So I decided to answer the phone, planning for this to be the last time I talked to him. I pressed the answer button. Hello. Immediately, Eric started shouting. What the hell do you think you're doing? Surprised by his loud voice, I pulled my phone away from my ear. I decided to record the call just in case something happened. Then I spoke again. What's the big deal? There's nothing left to talk about. Don't mess with me. Why were all my things sent to my parents' house? I just got to the apartment, and it's completely empty. Oh, that? Well, I canceled the lease on the apartment, so I sent your things to your parents' house. What? You didn't even talk to me about this, he yelled. There was no need. You were so sure about the divorce, so I made my own plans. I didn't think you would want to stay in the apartment that was under my name, I explained calmly. You had no right to touch my things. He shouted angrily. Actually, I did. You left the divorce papers and made it clear you wanted out. I just took care of the rest, I replied. Eric was silent for a moment, probably thinking about what to say next. Then he finally spoke again. You're just trying to make yourself look good. You always do this. You never cared about what I wanted. Eric, you called me a cheating, jobless woman. You wanted a divorce and didn't care to talk things through. Now I made the changes you wanted. There's no point in dragging this out, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Dragging this out? You moved all my stuff without my permission. You didn't even give me a chance to decide. He raged on. You had a chance. You chose to end things abruptly and left me with no choice but to take action. You said you couldn't stand me and wanted a divorce, so I took care of everything, I responded. Eric was silent for a moment, probably thinking about what to say next. Then he finally spoke again. You're just trying to make yourself look good. You always do this. You never cared about what I wanted. I took a deep breath and said, Eric, I've always tried to be understanding and support you, but you made it clear you didn't respect me or my work. I'm not going to argue about this anymore. The decision is final. What about all the memories? What about everything we shared? He asked, his voice softer now. Memories are just that. Memories. We can't live in the past. You made a choice, and now we have to move forward. I wish you the best, but I'm moving on, I replied, trying to stay strong. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then Eric finally said, Fine. Do whatever you want, but don't expect me to come crawling back to you. I don't. Goodbye, Eric, I said and hung up the phone. I felt a mix of relief and sadness wash over me. It wasn't easy to end things this way, but I knew it was the right decision. I took a deep breath and looked around my parents' house, feeling a sense of comfort and support. It was time to start a new chapter in my life, free from the negativity that had held me back for so long. I canceled the lease, so I had to move everything out. What? Canceled? How could you do something like that on your own? Eric shouted, sounding shocked and angry. The apartment was in my name. I can do whatever I want with it, I said calmly. At this point, I had nothing left to lose. His words didn't affect me at all, and I responded in a defiant tone. Eric's irritation was evident on his face. Don't mess with me. I don't care about the lease. We were married, remember? I lived in that apartment too, and you just went ahead and canceled it without even talking to me. Married, yes. But whether you think I cheated or not, we're still married. Canceling the lease on our apartment without discussing it with your husband. What were you thinking? You think you can just do whatever you want even though you're unemployed. I'll never forgive you for this. He continued to yell, showing no regard for my feelings or my situation. His rant made it clear he didn't care about me or my perspective at all, so I decided to tell them the truth. Sorry to burst your bubble, but you're getting all worked up about not forgiving me. And we're not even married anymore, okay? I said, trying to keep my voice calm. What? What are you talking about? Eric looked confused and angry. I submitted the divorce papers you left behind, so we're strangers now. Why should I keep renting a place for a stranger? Hold on, you're joking, right? You're basically unemployed. You'd be in trouble without me, he said, trying to sound like he was still in control of the situation. Don't make me laugh. When did I ever say that? I replied, feeling a mixture of frustration and relief. Eric was caught off guard and didn't know what to say. He stammered, trying to find the right words. Taking the opportunity to release my pent-up frustration, I continued. You've looked down on me all this time. I'm not the unemployed or jobless person you think I am. I didn't cheat on you. I was traveling abroad for work to find products for my customers. If you can't believe that, fine. But just so you know, I'll never forgive you. Well, wait a minute. Your online store, it's not like sales can just go up like that, he said, still trying to argue. I've been working hard for the past 5 years. You don't know anything about what I do, and you didn't even try to understand. You kept making assumptions and treating me like I was worthless. 5 years? He asked, clearly surprised. Yes, 5 years. Just so you know, I've been making many times more money than you. You looked down on me and belittled me. I don't want a marriage like this. You can live a miserable life on your own for all I care. Eric stood there speechless. He didn't know how to respond. I could see the realization starting to dawn on him that he had been wrong about me all along. But it was too late for regrets. You've always tried to make me feel small and unimportant. I continued, feeling a weight lifting off my shoulders as I spoke. You never supported me or my dreams. All you cared about was being in control and making yourself feel superior. Wait, let's talk about this, he finally said, his voice softer now. I didn't realize how serious you were. It's too late for that, Eric. You made your choice when you left those divorce papers and decided to treat me like I didn't matter. I'm moving on and I'm not looking back. But we were married. We have a history, he said, still trying to hold on to something. History is just that. History. We can't live in the past. You made it clear you didn't respect me or value our relationship. I'm done trying to make things work with someone who doesn't care about me. Eric looked like he wanted to say something, but he didn't. He just stood there, looking defeated and unsure of what to do next. I felt a sense of closure, knowing that I had finally stood up for myself and made a decision that was best for me. "Goodbye, Eric," I said, hurrying to leave. "I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for, but I won't be a part of it." As I walked away, I felt a mixture of relief and sadness. It wasn't easy to end things this way, but I knew it was the right decision. I had finally taken control of my life and my future. It was time to start a new chapter, free from the negativity and control that had held me back for so long. I took a deep breath and looked forward to the new opportunities and challenges that lay ahead, feeling stronger and more confident than ever before. I hung up the phone, deleted Eric's contact information, and blocked all ways for him to get in touch with me. It seemed he finally realized how many people were using my online store and how successful I had become. He even heard about my success through mutual friends. One day, he showed up at my parents' house, but I had no desire to see him or talk to him anymore. My dad turned him away at the door. Apparently, Eric's own parents found out about how badly he treated me and kicked him out of their house. Now I heard he is renting an apartment near his job and spends his time just going back and forth between home and work alone. As for me, I decided to stay with my parents for a while. Thanks to my job, I can work from anywhere, and that is a real blessing. My parents' house is quite old and needs some fixing up, so I am planning to start renovations soon. I'm confident that my online store will continue to grow and thrive. Living at my parents' house gives me the freedom to focus on my business without worrying about anyone else. I can travel abroad whenever I need to find new products for my store. Even though I now have a divorce on my record, I don't regret choosing to follow my dreams over staying in a toxic marriage. I plan to keep working hard and repay the kindness of the people who have supported me along the way. Every day, I get to work in a peaceful environment, free from the negativity that used to surround me. I can finally concentrate on expanding my business and exploring new opportunities. My parents have been incredibly supportive, and their encouragement has been a huge help. I'm planning to use some of the money I've earned from my store to renovate their house and make it more comfortable for them. The online store is doing great. I've expanded my product range and attracted more customers, which has helped increase sales significantly. I'm excited about the future and all the possibilities that lie ahead. Without the burden of a controlling partner, I feel more empowered and ready to take on new challenges. I've also reconnected with old friends who have been supportive and encouraging. They're happy to see me doing well and pursuing my passions. It's been refreshing to spend time with people who genuinely care about me and my happiness. Traveling has become a big part of my life now. I often go abroad to find unique products for my store. These trips have not only helped my business, but also allowed me to see the world and experience new cultures. It's something I always dreamed of doing, and now it's a reality. Looking back, I realize how important it was to put myself and my dreams first. Staying in a relationship that didn't support my goals would have only held me back. The decision to move on wasn't easy, but it was the best thing I could have done for myself. I'm proud of the progress I've made and the person I've become. The road ahead is full of potential, and I'm eager to see where it takes me. My focus now is on growing my business, taking care of my parents, and enjoying the freedom to live life on my own terms. I'm excited about the future and grateful for the opportunities that lie ahead. Hi there, my name's Nancy. I'm 21 years old. 3 years ago, I married the love of my life. Everything seemed to be going great. Even though my husband is Spanish, we didn't have many problems, except for the language barrier. To show my love, I decided to learn Spanish so I could talk better with him and his family. That's how much I loved him. I was doing this in secret. Johnson, my husband, and Mary, my mother-in-law, didn't know I was learning Spanish. Not only was I learning, but I got pretty good at it. I knew that if I was in Spain, I could manage. You might be wondering, if I'm so good at Spanish, why doesn't my husband know? Well, I was a bit shy. It can be scary trying to speak a new language, especially with people you're close to. But I decided it was time to stop hiding. I needed to speak Spanish with both my husband and my mother-in-law. After all, I learned to make communication easier, right? Well, it's a good thing I didn't start speaking Spanish right away, because I found out some surprising information one day that led to a series of unfortunate events. Hello, Mama. How are you, my son? Thank you for inviting me over this lovely Sunday afternoon. It was our pleasure, Mom. Hello, Mama. Hello, my daughter. How are you? Thank you so much for including me. Oh, hush, you know you're always wanted and welcome here. I brought some croissants and how do you Americans say, bagels? Yes, bagels and croissants for our afternoon tea. Oh, how lovely. Thank you so much. Come and sit, Mama. The food will be ready soon. Did she prepare the food? No, I did most of the prep. Don't worry. Oh, thank God. Hearing this, I wondered what she meant by that, but I was too shy to ask. How strange, Mary always seemed to like my cooking. Why was she saying those things? At the time, I thought maybe she just wanted to eat food made by her son. That day, maybe she wanted to taste food that reminded her of old times. Then I heard her say, I hate her cooking. Why did you invite me here instead of taking me to a cafe so we could avoid her, Mom? We agreed to speak in English, so Nancy doesn't feel left out, remember? Oh, forgive me, my sweet daughter. I was just saying that the food looks so good. I was surprised to learn that my son made it. Oh, I wish it was you who made it. I love your cooking. At this point, I was confused. How could she say such awful things in Spanish and then lie to my face in English? I thought I might have misunderstood, but I had a plan to confirm what I heard. Oh, please don't worry. You should never feel ashamed to speak your native tongue. Go right ahead. I'll be fine. I wanted to catch what she was saying, so I planned to use the Google Translate app to record her and make sure I understood correctly. We all sat at the table, getting ready to eat, and what came next shocked me to the core. I want us to discuss our plan. The time is approaching. It's literally tomorrow, Johnson. You have to be serious. The app, along with my Spanish knowledge, confirmed there was some plan going on, but I didn't know what it was. Mama, not now. I said I would handle it. What are you going to tell her, Nancy darling? Please pass me the sugar. She doesn't know anything about the plan. I was just going to tell her that I would be out of town. Out of town? What for? What was going on? I was so confused. I was constantly looking down at my phone to see what the app was translating. I think they assumed I wasn't paying attention and became less careful with their words, which was good for me as I was learning their true feelings. She's not too smart. Look at her, glued to her phone. We can talk about this now, okay, Mama? Fine. What do you want to discuss? The plane is leaving at 2:00 p.m. Are you sure you'll be able to escape her then? Escape me? What for? I was so confused, but I stayed calm and pretended not to understand so I could plan my next move. Yes, Mama, I know. I will do what needs to be done. I know how important this is. It is extremely important. If your great-uncle doesn't see us tomorrow, he will give the house to someone else, like your cousin or your aunt. We can't let that happen. No one needs to know about this house. Oh, Mama, you're so funny. Don't worry. I just said that in English so she doesn't suspect what we're talking about. Nancy. Yes, oh sorry, my love. I was just asking who made this delicious tea. It's splendid. Oh, that would be your talented son. I'm afraid I'm not as good as he is when it comes to these things. Oh, darling, your food is amazing. Amazingly terrible, Mom. She'll catch you. She can't catch me. She's too stupid to understand us. I don't know, Mom. She obviously understands some basics. Let's see, Nancy. How much Spanish do you know? At this moment, I knew I had to lie. I said I didn't know much so they would keep exposing themselves, and I could keep learning their true colors. How I managed to stay calm while being insulted still amazes me. I guess I knew it was more important to handle this situation than to get emotional. Right then, I said, oh, I'm still very bad at Spanish. I only know the typical things like buenos dias and como te llamas. But that's it. Oh, that simply won't do, darling. You should learn some more Spanish. Yes, ma'am, I will. Well, it's a good thing for Johnson and me, as we can gossip about you. I'm just, how do you say, kidding with you, mi niño. We would never do that to you. Are we doing it right now? Yes, which makes this extra funny. They laughed, and I kept using Google Translate. I also checked other apps, websites, and forums to see if what they were saying was correct. I got about 99% confirmation from these sources. Now that I knew they clearly didn't like me and were making fun of me, I had to gather as much information as possible. Even though their insults were hurting me, the next thing I heard shattered my resolve. As I was saying, this house is extremely important. No one can know about this house. Okay, we need to be the only ones knowing because we could make a lot of money. We can't lose this opportunity. I'm so glad we're doing this. It's a good thing we didn't tell my wife because I don't want to share the spoils. Me neither. Everything needs to go smoothly. Your great-uncle Jack said that whoever contacts him first about this issue will inherit the mansion. So we need to go there physically before anyone else and start working on remodeling and improving the house. I can't wait to have a house in New Hampshire. This is where I'll go to escape my wife and my life here in Mississippi. Sometimes I can't stand her. You know, you're still young, way too young to be married to someone like her. Come and live with me in New Hampshire. You can enjoy your youth with women and booze, have a good time, and then settle down when you're ready. Let's leave this place. Honestly, Mama, I think you're right. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I felt tears welling up. Excuse me, what's wrong? Is everything okay? Yes, I just need to get something from the kitchen. I couldn't listen to them anymore. I needed to collect myself and not make a scene. How could they say those awful things with me right there in the room? Did they have no shame? I was so upset I began pacing up and down the kitchen. And then I saw my mother-in-law's purse sitting on the counter. I decided to look inside and take her phone. Luckily, it was unlocked. I opened her WhatsApp and sent Uncle Jack's number to my phone. I quickly deleted the text from her phone, so it looked like nothing happened. It felt like I was acting on instinct. I didn't know why I did it, but I was glad because I was now planning to get back at them. I returned to the dining room where the conversation was still going on. They seemed to be talking about the same thing. So tomorrow we leave for vacation. I think it's well-deserved because of all the hard work we've been doing. I second that. We deserve this break. Is everything okay? Yes, honey, we were just talking about the weather and how it's a perfect day to go relax somewhere. Would you like us to do that maybe not today? See, no, okay. When would you like to go then, maybe tomorrow? Both Mary and Johnson froze slightly. I was looking for their reaction and noticed it. I don't think tomorrow will be possible. I asked Scene to help me with some things around the house. Oh, what things? Why is she asking so many questions? Just to move things around. I can help too if you like. That won't be necessary. See how nosy she is being? I don't like it one bit. Do you see why you have to leave this place? Don't worry, Mama, I've got this handled. I still managed to keep a smile despite knowing what they were saying. I was looking forward to my plan for revenge. I continued recording their conversations until the very end to make sure I had all the details. As I mentioned before, my Spanish was getting pretty good, but I still wanted to make sure I got the right information. That night, I snuck away to the bedroom and went to the office to do some more investigating. I replayed the audio, and sure enough, my doubts about my accuracy were gone. From this whole ordeal, I learned that there was a vacation planned for tomorrow to go and claim a house from Great Uncle Jack, and that these people apparently hated me and were planning to leave. A bonus piece of information I got was when I went to the kitchen to pace. I had left my phone, which was still recording, in the room with my husband and mother-in-law, and I managed to pick up some more useful information. The conversation consisted of Mary asking Johnson about his computer password because she wanted to change some aspects of their flight. I managed to get the password and flight details. I must have hit the jackpot. I logged into Johnson's computer, and sure enough, there were flight details on the website where he booked the tickets. Feeling very sneaky and devious, I may or may not have changed their flight details, pushing their flight to the day after tomorrow. This was just phase 1 of my plans. There was a lot more to come. Since I had sent myself Great Uncle Jack's number, I was ready to do what I needed to do. Hello, Uncle Jack. It's Nancy. Oh, hello, darling. How are you doing? Is everything okay? Well, no, not really. I went into great detail, explaining what had happened that day. I even sent him the audio recording as proof, because without it, I doubt he would have believed me. We cut the call so he could listen to the voice recordings, and we talked again after. After he finished listening, wow, I don't even know what to say. How could Mary and Johnson do this? They were such sweet and innocent people when they were younger. How could they do this to you? To me? I know it's a lot to take in. It was shocking to me, too. You have indeed improved your Spanish. Well done. Thanks, Jack, but now that we know this, what do we do? Well, obviously, they're not going to get the house. That's a fact. After hearing all of this, there is no way that I would never give such a valuable and honorable gift to people who plan to ruin it with their evilness and foolishness. Okay, I get it. It's your house, and you have every right to do what you want with it. Yes, I do. From now on, I will ignore their calls. Let's see how they feel about that. Thanks again for bringing this to my attention. You are a good and kind-hearted person, Nancy. Please don't let the ugliness of this world change you. Thank you for your time and willingness to listen. Hearing what you heard today couldn't have been easy. I applaud you for your strength. Please take care, Uncle Jack. You too. Love, good night. With that, I knew I had secured the downfall of both Mary and Johnson. Now that everything was set, I just had to wait for the right moment to make my move. When I got back to the bedroom, Johnson was still fast asleep. It hurt to know that my husband, whom I love dearly, would treat me this way. I didn't know he felt all those things, and maybe if we had talked, we could have found a solution. But he chose to be deceitful. I took his phone and turned off his alarm. Without it, he would surely oversleep, and that's exactly what happened. I packed my things and went to a hotel for the night. I couldn't stay in the house with someone like that. The next day, absolute chaos ensued. I'm sure Jan woke up to 100 missed calls from his mother, and was frantically packing because he hadn't packed the day before. I suspect this because I got a call from him at 1 p.m. Where the hell are you? Why didn't my alarm go off? And why aren't you here? Oh, I decided to take a little vacation day for myself. Oh, that's nice. A little heads up would have been appreciated, though. Yeah, likewise. Seen what? What do you mean? Anyways, that doesn't matter. I'm running late for my flight. I mean, my meeting with Mom. Why are you in such a hurry? I'm sure she wouldn't mind you being a little bit late. You don't understand. Anyway, it's fine. I won't be home tonight and tomorrow night. I've got a lot I need to do. See you later. Before I could even respond, he hung up. I'm pretty sure he was so overwhelmed that he didn't even check the proper details of his ticket, which I had changed to the next day. Through the Find My iPhone app, I saw that he made his way to the airport. Imagine waking up, rushing out of the house with only minutes to spare to make it to your flight, just to find out that it had been canceled. I'm sure he was moving like a madman up and down that airport. I could almost see him frantically checking his phone, realizing the flight details were wrong. Suddenly, I received a call from Mary. What have you done? What do you mean, Mary? Drop the act. I know you tampered with our flight. If by tamper you mean change the date, then yes, that's exactly what I did. Why would you do that? I was trying to help you guys out. Didn't you say you wanted John's help with moving some stuff around? I noticed that you had the flight booked for today, the same day John was supposed to help you. So I decided to change some things. You're welcome. Johnson, come and talk to your wife before I reach through the phone and strangle her. Johnson grabbed the phone. Listen here, Nancy. I don't know what you've done, but whatever it is, stop it right now. Uncle Jack still isn't answering his phone. Try again, Mary said, her voice shaking with frustration. He isn't answering his phone because he doesn't want to speak with you too, I replied calmly. You understand us? Johnson asked, sounding shocked. Every last word. But how? I've been practicing, I said, feeling a strange mix of satisfaction and sadness. I've been learning Spanish so I could communicate better with you and your mom. But now I see it also helped me uncover your plans. Johnson's face went pale. You knew all along? Yes, I heard everything. Your plans to leave me, to claim the house without me knowing. I heard it all. Johnson and Mary were silent. I could hear their heavy breathing over the phone, the shock and fear evident in their silence. So what now? Johnson finally asked. Now you deal with the consequences of your actions, I said. I already spoke to Uncle Jack. He knows everything. You won't be getting that house. But Nancy, you don't understand, Johnson pleaded. We had no choice. We needed that house. You had a choice, I said firmly. You could have been honest with me. Instead, you chose to deceive me. Now you have to live with the consequences. There was another long silence. Then Mary spoke, her voice trembling. Nancy, we're sorry. We didn't mean for it to go this far. It's too late for apologies, I replied. You made your bed, now you have to lie in it. I hung up the phone and took a deep breath. It was done. I had exposed their plans and ensured they wouldn't get the house. I felt a sense of relief, but also a deep sadness. The man I loved, the family I thought I was a part of, had betrayed me. But I knew I had to move on. I packed my things and checked out of the hotel. I decided to stay with a friend for a while until I figured out my next steps. As I walked out of the hotel, I felt a mix of emotions: anger, sadness, relief, but most of all, a sense of empowerment. I had stood up for myself and taken control of the situation, and now I was ready to start a new chapter in my life, free from deceit and betrayal. I told you, Mama. I told you she might hear us. So that means yesterday you heard everything? Yep. Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to divorce your good-for-nothing son and leave you two to deal with each other. How blessed. Stay. Oh, and next time you want to talk about someone with them right there in the room, make sure they don't understand what you're saying. Have a nice life. I hung up before they could respond. I was done with their nonsense. Later that day, I got a call from Uncle Jack. Hello, dear. How are you? I'm a bit upset. I just had an ugly fight with John and Mary, and now I'm getting a divorce from him. I'm so sorry that things turned out this way, Nancy. It's part of life, I guess. How are things on your end? Well, I finally spoke to them and gave them a piece of my mind. They are not happy. What did you say to them? I told John that he's an idiot for treating you the way he did, and told Mary that she's evil for roping her son into her schemes. I also told them that I have given you the house. You what? Yes, dear, the mansion is yours. Even if you get a divorce from John, it's all yours, and you can share it with whomever you please. I don't know what to say, Jack. It's too much. I wanted this house to go to someone kind and compassionate, but also tough and strong when needed. That's exactly who you are. A house is the least I could do after all the stress and turmoil those two put you through. The house is yours. Take it. After that call, I felt a strange mix of emotions. I had managed to distance myself from two toxic people, and on top of that, I have been given a multi-million-dollar mansion. It felt surreal, like something out of a movie, but it was real and it was happening to me. The next few days were a whirlwind. I moved my belongings into the mansion and started to make it my own. Every room, every corner became a testament to my resilience and strength. I decorated the house with a sense of newfound freedom and pride. I was no longer bound by the deceit and betrayal of Johnson and Mary. This house, this beautiful mansion, was a symbol of my victory over their treachery. As expected, Mary and Johnson were furious. They sent me constant threats, trying to intimidate me into giving up the house. But I stood my ground. Each time they sent a threat, I responded with a picture of a different part of the house, reminding them that it was mine, not theirs. I wanted them to see what they had lost, to feel the sting of their own actions. Revenge never felt so sweet. One evening, as I was sitting in the grand living room surrounded by the opulence of the mansion, I reflected on everything that had happened. I thought about how much I had loved Johnson, how I tried to learn Spanish to communicate better with him and his family. I remembered the hurtful things they had said about me, their plans to leave me out of their lives. It had been a painful journey, but I had come out stronger on the other side. I received another call from Uncle Jack. Hello, dear. I just wanted to check in and see how you're doing. I'm doing well, Jack. Thank you for everything. The house is beautiful. I'm glad you like it. You deserve it after everything you've been through. I appreciate that. It means a lot to me. You know, Nancy, I've been thinking. Maybe you should consider staying in Spain for a while. You could use a change of scenery, and it might help you heal. That's a good idea, Jack. I think I will. Thank you for the suggestion. As I hung up the phone, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The future was uncertain, but I knew I had the strength to face whatever came my way. I had overcome betrayal and heartbreak, and I had emerged victorious. This mansion was not just a house. It was a symbol of my resilience, my strength, and my ability to overcome any obstacle. In the end, I realized that the best revenge was living well. I had a beautiful home, a supportive family in Uncle Jack, and a bright future ahead of me. Mary and Johnson could stew in their own bitterness and regret, but I was moving forward with my life. And that, I knew, was the greatest revenge of all. Why did I receive a letter from my late mother-in-law? I was shocked as I looked at the envelope that had just arrived in my home mailbox. The letter was from my mother-in-law, who we had just buried yesterday. She had always been very kind to me since I married her son, and I loved her a lot. We often went out to eat, enjoyed shopping trips, and became close like friends despite being different ages. Her sudden death left me heartbroken, and even after her funeral, I was still struggling to accept that she was gone. Getting a letter from her during this sad time was a huge surprise. I quickly opened the letter and found something unexpected. My mother-in-law had asked a temple priest to send me this letter after she passed away. The letter told me to find a secret compartment in the family's old chest and reveal the hidden door. It gave detailed instructions on how to open this hidden door and made it clear I should do this alone. Seeing that my brother-in-law, his wife, and their kids were all out, I rushed to my in-laws' house. Using the spare key, I went in and followed the instructions to open this secret compartment by myself. It's open, I sighed with relief and looked inside. My name is Betty. I'm 40 years old and work from home as a web designer. I married Kevin, who is 5 years older than me, 6 years ago. We met through a friend and are still very close. However, we haven't been able to have children yet. Both of us love kids and wanted to start a family soon after getting married, but it hasn't happened. I used to feel very sad about this, but there was always someone who was kind to me despite it all. My mother-in-law. Betty, don't worry so much. There's no need to rush, she would say. Hey, how about we go to the new waffle place near the station for a change? My mother-in-law always encouraged me and spoke comforting words. She was bright, kind, and caring, and I loved her deeply. She often helped me, and over time, I worried less about not having children. Though I still want children, I've decided not to go for intensive infertility treatments, but to let things happen naturally. Since my husband Kevin often travels for work, my mother-in-law and I usually go out to eat or shop together when he's away. We've grown close, just like friends, despite our age difference. She lives nearby with my brother-in-law's family, who have 4 children. Although she gets along well with them, my brother-in-law and his wife often insult my husband and me for not having children. Betty, you haven't had any children yet. We have 4 lovely kids here. Being childless is unfilial. Cut ties with your mother-in-law, soon Lisa, my brother-in-law's wife, would say smugly, and my brother-in-law Brian would agree, saying, Lisa's right. Well, Kevin has never been impressive anyway. Even if you had kids, they wouldn't amount to much. Initially, my husband and I would respond to such cruel remarks from my brother-in-law's family. However, since they never listened, we gradually stopped reacting and tried to avoid them as much as possible. They treat us disrespectfully, but act very nicely in front of my mother-in-law. We haven't told her about their behavior to avoid causing her worry. One holiday, my husband, my mother-in-law, and I planned to go out for a meal together. When we arrived at my parents-in-law's house, she wasn't waiting outside as usual. Is she not ready yet? I wondered aloud. She should be coming out soon, my husband replied. We didn't think much of it and waited. However, as time passed minus 10 minutes, then 15, she still didn't appear or answer her phone. I wonder what's going on with your mom. I started feeling uneasy and increasingly anxious. We rang the doorbell of my parents-in-law's house, but there was no response. We decided to use the spare key to enter. Hey, Mom, my husband called out as he took off his shoes at the entrance, but still there was no reply from inside. With a bad feeling, we quickly searched for my mother-in-law, and then we found her collapsed in her bedroom. "Oh my God," I exclaimed as I rushed to her side, and my husband immediately called for an ambulance. It seemed that my brother-in-law's family was out because no one else was at the house besides my mother-in-law. The ambulance arrived in about 15 minutes, and she was swiftly taken to the hospital. But unfortunately, she passed away there. It was a stroke. My husband and I were heartbroken by this sudden loss, and we cried a lot. Not despite our grief, we knew there were many things to do, like preparing for her funeral. The funeral was to be a family affair, and my brother-in-law took on the role of the chief mourner to honor my mother-in-law, and I worked together with him on the preparations. However, even during the planning with relatives and discussions with the funeral home, my brother-in-law seemed reluctant and showed no signs of grief. He did his duties at the wake and funeral, but often he would call my husband over after talking briefly with relatives, and then abruptly leave, which offended them. During the post-funeral gathering with relatives, my brother-in-law was the first to sit down and refused to get up even when my husband urged him to greet the guests. He just sat there drinking his beer, and his wife did the same. So my husband and I went around thanking the relatives for coming and sharing memories of my mother-in-law. Seeing his parents just eating and drinking seemed to set a negative tone for the gathering. My brother-in-law's 4 children were busy playing games, laughing loudly, and playfully nudging each other, creating a mood that didn't seem right for after a funeral. None of my brother-in-law's family seemed sad about my mother-in-law's death. The other relatives noticed this and didn't try to talk to my brother-in-law and his wife. They just said goodbye and shared memories with my husband and me. Despite the obvious change in the relatives' attitudes, my brother-in-law's family didn't seem to care. They kept ordering more beer, talked about inheritances and planned trips, even though we were supposed to be mourning. It was disrespectful considering how much my mother-in-law had done for them while she was alive. I couldn't help but look at them with disapproval. The next day, my husband left early for some errands, and I was at home planning to check the mailbox for the newspaper. That's when I noticed a letter. Wondering who it could be from, I saw it was addressed to me. To my surprise, it was from my mother-in-law. Opening the letter in the living room, I found something unexpected. The letter said that my mother-in-law had arranged with a temple priest to send it after she passed away. It had instructions on how to open a hidden compartment in a chest and the contact details of the family lawyer. There was also a note to make sure I opened it by myself. I read my mother-in-law's letter over and over. Though she was slender, her handwriting was bold and strong. Touching the strong strokes of her writing that reflected her strong character, glancing at the clock, it was 8:20. No one should be at my in-laws' house now. The kids would be at school, and according to a social media post by my brother-in-law's wife, they had left early that morning. With this in mind, I quickly got ready to go to the family home. This morning, I saw that they were planning an outing together. They even sent their children to school, even though it was the day after our grandmother's funeral. They seemed eager to enjoy their day off. If their post was accurate, there should be nobody at the family home. I realized I had to go now, or I might not get another chance. When I used the spare key to open the front door of my in-laws' house, I entered slowly. It was sad that my mother-in-law, who always greeted me with a smile, wasn't here. Holding my aching chest, I went into her room. The chest, an old piece that belonged to my mother-in-law, opened smoothly, perhaps because she took care of it just as the letter said. I found a hidden door at the back of a drawer. Thank goodness it's open. I sighed in relief as I managed to open it. Safely inside, there was another document, along with what was written in the letter. What is this? I stared at the documents, feeling my mother-in-law's love and tears almost spilling. I felt like staying there and crying, but I had to leave quickly. It wouldn't be good if someone came back and saw me, especially since the letter said to do this alone. After returning home with all the documents, I contacted the family lawyer mentioned in the letter to inform them of my mother-in-law's passing. Just as I was about to reach out to my husband and my brother-in-law's family to see if we could all gather this weekend, I received an email. It was from my sister-in-law, urging us to meet at my in-laws' house this weekend for some important news. Despite feeling uneasy, declining seemed odd, so I agreed to her proposal. Over the weekend, I went to my in-laws' house with my husband, feeling nervous about the discussion. My brother-in-law and his wife had smug looks, and their 4 children were not around, probably taken somewhere else. As soon as we sat down, they presented a document. "This is the will left by my mother-in-law," my sister-in-law announced loudly. The signature on the will was indeed my mother-in-law's, and it stated that all assets would go to my brother-in-law and his wife. See, it's written here that we get everything. So unfortunately, you won't get any inheritance. Too bad, huh? My brother-in-law laughed mockingly, his expression ugly, while my husband looked bewildered. I stood up quietly and brought in the lawyer who had been waiting outside. Who is this?" My brother-in-law and his wife asked, puzzled by the sudden appearance of the lawyer. My husband, who didn't know the lawyer was there, was also surprised. "This person is the lawyer whom my mother-in-law trusted during her life," I explained briefly. My brother-in-law and his wife looked confused and then angry. "Why did you bring a lawyer here?" they demanded. "It's part of my mother-in-law's instructions. She wanted the lawyer here to help make sure the estate is divided fairly," I said. My brother-in-law and his wife insisted loudly that they didn't need a lawyer. My brother-in-law slammed his hand on the desk and pointed at the will, saying, "My mother left a will. We don't need a lawyer." The lawyer quietly raised his hand and asked, "Are you sure your mother wrote the entire will herself?" "That's obvious." My brother-in-law shouted back. The lawyer looked concerned and shook his head. "This can't be recognized as a valid will. A real handwritten will must be entirely written by the person it belongs to." He pointed out that only the words at the beginning and the signature at the end were in my mother-in-law's handwriting. The rest looked like it was printed from a computer. The room went quiet. My brother-in-law reached out to the will, but it still showed the same printed words. Suddenly my husband said, "Why is the back of the paper so clean?" I looked closely, and indeed, there was something odd. The handwriting in the signature section is different from the rest. Could this be forged? I wondered aloud. My brother-in-law and his wife trembled at the lawyer's observation. "What are you talking about? We wouldn't do such a thing," they stammered. "Why are you so nervous if it's not forged?" the lawyer cut in. "Forging a will is a serious crime." Hearing this, my brother-in-law and his wife turned pale. Despite their agitated and confused excuses, the lawyer delivered the final blow. "Betty has a notarized will, so your will is invalid." "What?" My brother-in-law and his wife gasped, their eyes wide. "We never heard of that," they said. In the letter I received from my mother-in-law, she mentioned that she hid a notarized will behind the hidden door of the chest. We didn't know about this earlier. The letter not only told us where she hid the will, but also explained why she made it and why she told me about it. My mother-in-law had been feeling her health decline and had prepared the will because she probably suspected that my brother-in-law and his wife might tamper with it. I thought she didn't know their true nature, but it seemed she had a sense of their greed. The notarized will stated that the assets would be divided equally between my brother-in-law and my husband. This surprised my brother-in-law and his wife, and their eyes went wide. Then my brother-in-law suddenly shouted, claiming he should be the beneficiary of our mother's life insurance as the eldest son. I calmly responded that the life insurance certificate was also with me, as per my mother-in-law's trust, and the beneficiary was me, not him. Inside the hidden door, there was not just the notarized will, but also the life insurance certificate. My brother-in-law and his wife couldn't believe it. They kept saying they knew nothing about this. The lawyer explained that changing the beneficiary of a life insurance policy doesn't necessarily require informing the original beneficiary. My brother-in-law was upset and slammed the table. My husband turned to me, anxious, and asked when his mom had entrusted these things to me. I smiled and explained that it was written in the letter from his mother. She had wanted to tell him too, but she was worried that if both of us knew, his brother and sister-in-law might become suspicious, so she trusted only me with the information. While my husband and I were talking, my sister-in-law burst in hysterically. She couldn't accept that we, who hadn't even shown her children to my mother-in-law, would inherit her estate. "This is ridiculous," she exclaimed. "I can't accept this at all." My brother-in-law chimed in, his face there, just for her inheritance, splitting it equally. "Don't make me laugh," he continued. "The inheritance is all ours," my brother-in-law asserted. My sister-in-law joined in, shouting and adding to his selfish claims. "We have 4 children as compensation for you not showing my mother-in-law any grandchildren. You should give all of her inheritance to our children for their future. We have shown her 4 grandchildren, so we are much more deserving than you." Despite my sister-in-law's aggressive tone, I stayed calm. "What you're saying doesn't make sense." "Please calm down," I said. My calm demeanor seemed to infuriate her even more. "Your calm attitude annoys me so much. Just give us the money already. You're a useless, childless woman," she yelled, lunging at me. My husband and the lawyer stepped in, but before they could stop her, my sister-in-law punched me in the head. "Ouch!" I cried out in pain. She had several large rings on her fingers, so it felt like being hit with makeshift brass knuckles. "Stop it." My husband and the lawyer pulled my sister-in-law away, but she tried to reach for me again in her agitated state. "Give us the inheritance. I deserve it all more than you do. I have 4 children," she shouted, her eyes bloodshot and her face twisted with anger. My brother-in-law egged her on, encouraging her to hit me more. Enraged, my husband called the police. When they arrived shortly after, he and the lawyer explained the situation. My brother-in-law and his wife were escorted away by the police. My husband and I thanked the lawyer and decided to send him home for the day. What was supposed to be a discussion about creating an estate division agreement turned into a chaotic ordeal. My husband and I agreed to bring a gift of apology another day. He was deeply concerned about me being hit by my sister-in-law, but seemed relieved when I told him the headache had completely subsided after the tumultuous events. "It's been quite an intense time," I murmured. Then, unexpectedly, my husband brought up something else. "Hey, Lisa seems to constantly talk about the children. You know, she always boasted about showing Mom 4 grandchildren and how great she was. Don't you think she's overly fixated on money?" Indeed, my sister-in-law had been excessively promoting her children and seemed really focused on money during the earlier argument. While she has been quite vocal about the children for a while, and her obsession with money was indeed extreme, I replied. Her expression while hitting me was terrifying. Turning red as he shouted, "You unlucky bunch have no right to Mom's estate." We were living. I replied, "Yeah, you're right. It's a bit abnormal," he said, and then fell silent. "What's wrong? Is there something bothering you?" I asked, not understanding what he was getting at. Well, there's something bothering me, and I'm considering suggesting it to my brother. I think it might be a good idea to have DNA tests done for their 4 children. My husband's response surprised me. DNA tests? Yeah, and I'm also thinking about proposing a background check on Lisa. Something doesn't sit right with me. It's just a gut feeling. Although I thought it might be unnecessary, my husband's intuition had been accurate in the past. Okay, if that's what you suggest, let's propose it to your brother later on. I agreed. When my husband told my brother-in-law about the idea, he ridiculed and yelled at him extensively. Just because you don't have kids yourselves, don't doubt ours. My brother-in-law shouted. But before parting ways, he took some materials about DNA testing from my husband. Perhaps he had some doubts as well. The first revelation came from the DNA testing between my brother-in-law and his children. It turned out that 3 out of the 4 children didn't share his blood. I was a bit suspicious of the youngest child because they didn't look much like any of us, but I was surprised about the middle one too. My husband was speechless, and my brother-in-law decided to investigate his wife's background thoroughly. The results were shocking. It turned out that my sister-in-law had relationships with multiple men even before marrying my brother-in-law. Recently, her affairs were discovered by the wives of her lovers, who then demanded compensation. Since my sister-in-law was at home more often than my brother-in-law, she was able to hide any evidence, like registered letters. The compensation demanded was far more than she could afford from her earnings or savings. It became clear that she was determined to get her hands on my mother-in-law's inheritance at any cost. Eventually, the situation escalated, and my brother-in-law and sister-in-law ended up in a violent fight, throwing things and hitting each other until the neighbors, unable to stand the noise, called the police. Both were taken into custody, facing charges for forging the will and now additional charges of assault. Further police investigation revealed they had committed theft and harassed wealthy individuals among other offenses. Eventually, they both ended up in jail. As for the future of the 4 children they left behind, my husband and I were deeply troubled. Since my mother-in-law's passing, we have been the closest relatives. We considered taking them in, but decided against it after much thought. The children had been influenced so much by their parents that they casually insulted us as childless incompetents. The oldest at 19 should know right from wrong, and the youngest at 7 should understand proper behavior, yet they smirked and insulted us every time they saw us. Even with their parents in trouble, our 16-year-old nephew said, "We'd be better off raised by childless idiots," which was more than we could bear facing such hostility. We couldn't find any affection for the children or any hope of raising them to be decent people. Ultimately, we contacted my sister-in-law's parents and decided to sever ties with the children. It seems the children understood our decision, as our nephew said, "I'd rather live in Grandma's old shack than with the childless couple." With those words, we felt it was best to leave things as they were. We haven't told the children that 3 out of the 4 aren't biologically related to my brother-in-law. Whether we share this fact or not, we leave it to the relatives of my brother-in-law and his wife to decide. My husband and I decided to move to a distant place, using the inheritance from my mother-in-law to start anew. We moved to a place full of greenery and nature where we quickly felt at home. There's a charming waffle shop near our house, and every time we pass by, we wish my mother-in-law could have visited it with us. Soon after the move, I found out I was pregnant. When the pregnancy test showed a positive result, I couldn't help but scream with surprise and happiness. Later, the doctor confirmed that I was indeed pregnant. Both my husband and I cried tears of joy as we hugged each other. My mother-in-law would have been so happy if she were still alive. Additionally, the business plan I had been secretly preparing is progressing well. Both my husband and I are working hard, looking forward to the arrival of our child, and enjoying fulfilling days full of happiness.